Hi folks, welcome to Perf Mentor. Hope you are doing well. In this video, we are going to discuss about the types of performance testing. Before we get into the topic, let's quickly recap as what is performance testing. What is performance testing? Performance testing is a discipline or is a technique or is a type of testing using which we test the responsiveness, stability and the reliability of the application when the application is subjected to varying workload condition, right? If you want to know in depth or in detail about what is performance testing, please refer my previous video. I have clearly explained what is performance testing, giving some real life examples that should be very self-explanatory and in detail explanation. Okay, now let's get into the topic. Let's try to understand how many types of performance testing are there. There are totally 10 different types of performance testing. 1. Load testing. 2. Stress testing. Then we have endurance or soak testing, spike testing, volume testing, scalability testing, resilience testing, front-end performance testing. We have geography-based testing and batch performance testing. Even though we have so many performance testing, right? Most organizations will not do all this type of performance testing based on their unique requirement or their need, right? They will select as what type of testing is required. As a performance tester or an engineer and architect, you need to decide based on your clients or your application need what type of performance testing is required for them, right? So let's quickly try to understand each type of testing and with an example. Okay, so let's start with load testing. So what is load testing, right? So load testing is nothing but testing the performance of the application when the application is subjected to anticipated load condition. So when I say anticipated load condition, right, like we know how much of a load we are going to push on the system. For example, if you take any e-commerce website, right, Flipkart or Amazon, they clearly know as how much of traffic is going to hit their system on any given day or during holiday season, how much of traffic they can expect on their website. They have this big analytics team who can forecast how much traffic can be expected on the system. So based on that number, right, we are going to test the application and measure the performance of the application. That is nothing but load testing. So next comes the stress testing. So what is stress testing and what is the objective? Stress testing is nothing but testing the application till that point or loading the application till the point it breaks. So the main objective is to identify the system breaking point. So how do we test it? We try to push load into the system. It's a pure experimentation approach. So we try to push the load into the system incrementally, or we double the load till the point at which the system breaks. To give you a real-time example, right? Let's take an IRCTC application or a banking application, right? Let's take IRCTC for example. When people are booking for Tatkal, so the application cannot allow all the users to enter the system, right? If it allows all the users into the system, the application is going to crash, right? And no one is going to able to book the ticket. So they need to know as how much of a load their system can handle. Based on that, they can allow only that volume of traffic to enter the system, and any request that breaches the threshold limit, right, they will just fail that request at the entry point itself. So that's an example for stress testing. So now let's go to the next type of testing, endurance or soak testing. So the main objective of doing endurance or soak testing is to measure the performance of the application when the application is subjected to load for a prolonged period of time. How do we test it? Like, we apply a consistent load on the system for a longer period of time. And the purpose is to identify potential memory leaks. To give you a real-time example, right? So there are applications, which serves only during the daytime. For example, e-commerce application, there'll be huge number of traffic only during the daytime. But there are certain applications like streaming platform, or there are other websites, right, which has to serve their customers 24/7. So those kind of applications, we need to test the performance of the application or we need to test the stability of the application when load is subjected to the application for a longer duration of time. And if there are, to understand if there are any memory leaks or any kind of other issue. So for those unique scenarios, we try to do this endurance or soak testing. So next comes the spike testing. The main objective of spike testing is to understand when a system is subjected to sudden influx of load or a sudden, there is a sudden spike of load, how the system will respond. So that's the main objective of doing the spike testing. So how do we test this? We are testing the application with a steady flow of load. Suddenly we push a load into the system. Suddenly more load into the system, maybe in the 30th minute or 25th minute, we push more load into the system and try to measure the performance, right? Try to measure the key performance indicator or measure the performance of the system and see if it has any issue. So that is nothing but spike testing. And spike testing, when there is some unique holiday period, or sometimes during, for example, during this 2020 cricket season and all, there will be a sudden spike in the volume of traffic that enters the system. So for those unique scenarios, right, like they have to do the spike testing. So next comes the volume testing. Volume testing is nothing but to test the system performance when the system is handling a large volume of data, right? How do we test this? Look, large volume of data, for example, if there is any table, right? So capacity of the database is 20%, how the SQL responds, how the application or the transaction responds. And if the capacity of the SQL is 80%, how does the performance looks like? So there are varying situations using which we can mock the system and try to understand how the system performs. So next comes the scalability testing. Scalability testing is nothing but how the system performs when we incrementally increase the load, right? In terms of, for example, there are applications which are elastic in nature, right? So for a certain amount of load, it will respond in a certain way. So when that reaches the threshold, right, or when we keep pushing the load, it spins up additional servers. So testing those kind of scenarios, like at what point it is spinning up more scenarios, there are how does the performance looks like when it nears that threshold before spinning up the extra server, right? So those kind of testing, those kind of unique scenarios, we use the scalability testing. And next comes the resilience testing. So resilience testing is interesting testing. So this is also called chaos testing, or they have different names, but we can call it as resilience testing. The purpose of this test is to check if something goes wrong in a distributed environment, if one component of the whole architecture goes down, right, how does the system handles that failure, right? So understanding that is nothing but resilience testing. So how do we do that? When we subject the application to a consistent load, and we pull the wires off. Not when I say when we pull the wire off, we bring down one application node, or there are different things we can do. Literally, you have to introduce a chaos in your distributed system and see how gracefully your system will handle that failure. So that's the purpose of this resilience testing. So next comes the front-end performance testing. So this is very important actually. Nowadays it's gaining traction. So the purpose of this testing is to measure the performance of the front-end components. There are two components, right? Like we have the front-end components and the back-end performance, right? Back-end performance in terms of application, database, how it is performing. There's the other thing called the front-end components. When the web page loads, how does the HTML components or the web assets loads, and how quick the web assets loads, or if there is any blocking. So those kind of things we test using the front-end performance testing. So how do we test? So there are different front-end performance testing tools using which we can measure the we call it as core web vitals. There are some key performance indicators that are specific to the front-end performance testing. By measuring those key performance indicators, we will be able to tell whether the front-end performance looks good or bad for an application. right? And this is primarily done to ensure that the end user experience looks good and the aesthetics of the page, right, in terms of loading each frames, and from the user experience how good it looks, that's the main purpose of the front end performance testing. And it is very essential for any website or any retail or any application that's dependent on its end customers. And next comes the geography based testing. So the object of this testing is to check the system performance or your website performance across different geography, right? If a load comes from North America or Australia, how does the performance looks like when we simulate a traffic from the different geography? That is the purpose of the geography based testing. How do we test that? We have, either we can have our AWS machines on that particular location and simulate the load, or we can have some simulators using which we can mimic the geographic location and we can test it. So if you look at the real-time example, any website or application that serves customer across different geography, it is essential for them to check whether the performance of their application is uniform across different geography. So then comes the batch performance testing. Batch performance testing, the objective is to ensure that the batch jobs that are run by organizations are quick and stable enough, right? How do we test that? Like, we run the batch jobs and to process certain amount of records and try to understand how much time it is taking to process that certain number of records or the data. If it is taking too long, then there's a potential performance issue. We try to understand the problem and try to fix it. And for real-time example, most of the banking application, retail, they run their invoices, payroll, or month-end jobs, right? For all those things, it's essential that they need to do the batch performance testing, and it's also important all the batch jobs do not take a very longer duration. So that's all about the different types of performance testing. Thanks for listening to this video. If you want to learn more on performance testing and engineering, join our Mentees Club. The details are given in the description. Happy learning and see you in our next video. Thank you.